What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Gooner channel. And tonight, Chelsea hosted Tottenham in what many people were calling the Battle of the Bridge. And I actually thought it was going to be more like banter at the bridge, given the way those two teams played each other last time. I thought it was going to be like watching two drunken clowns fighting over a whoopee cushion. In the end, it will most likely just be remembered as the Bottle of the Bridge. And much as I hate using the phrase bottle, it is a phrase they've been joyously using about us because we weren't able to make top four 2 years ago. We weren't able to beat Pep Guardiola's Manchester City, treble-winning Manchester City, to the title last season. And this despite the fact that they've never even come close to winning anything. As tough as it was to not win the league last season and to see us throw away our chances with some lacklustre performances, for all that they were calling us bottlers, their season ended calamitously. Ever since Antonio Conte gave that famous press conference talking about the history of failure at the club, and they appointed Stellini to replace him, which didn't work at all, and then Ryan Mason delivering absolutely nothing positive for them at all. This season, you kind of felt like, well, it can only go up from here. They've certainly reached their lowest point, or have they? In summer, there was a lot of speculation that they might bring in Julian Nagelsmann or Luis Enrique. Pochettino was talked about, and he certainly would have been the fans' favourite. But instead, they went for the kind of risky and certainly brave appointment of Ange Postecoglu, who had done so well in Scotland. And they were very quick to tell us, he's got a winner's pedigree, plays attacking football. And look, Spurs fans who'd had to put up with Mourinho and Conte, not to mention Stellini and Mason, certainly had enough of that defensively trying to eke out points. So when Ange Postecoglu starts with 9 games and puts them top of the league, some of them, just to highlight how deluded this fan base is, had started talking quite seriously about the prospects of them winning the league. No one really took that seriously, but it certainly looked like Ange Postecoglu had reinvigorated a side that had been forced to play too defensively. And even though they lost their talisman in Harry Kane, they had a phenomenal start to the season. Of course, most of that was down to the fact that they didn't really play any big clubs. They got a draw at the Emirates, which they were thrilled about, and everyone was ready to tell you that this was the start of something big. The game against Chelsea, where Romero and Udogie got sent off, Maddison got injured, and the cracks in the squad depth started to appear. Despite having had some really good summer transfers, they brought in Vicario when they weren't able to get David Raya, and he's looked good all season, if not so much recently. They brought in Mickey van der Ven, who is certainly a very good defender, very pacey, and has impressed, I think, almost everyone. Destiny Udogie, a lot of Spurs fans will tell you, is one of the best left-backs in the league. And Romero was starting to look a bit more like a World Cup winner. James Maddison was the playmaker general who was outperforming Odegaard and making everybody wonder why Arsenal hadn't signed him. The game at home to Chelsea, where for the first time Ange's tactics were really called into question, because despite going down to 9 men, they decided to continue playing this ridiculously high line. And this was a Chelsea side that had Nicholas Jackson up front, didn't look in any kind of shape to be a Premier League striker, and he managed to score a hat-trick. It was largely because Tottenham refused to change, refused to sit back and defend, and instead allowed Chelsea multiple opportunities late in the game. It looked for a while like Chelsea weren't going to be able to work out this high line, but when they did, Nicholas Jackson scored a hat-trick. And this was the first time that Tottenham fans started to grumble a little bit, because after all, they don't like losing to Chelsea. It's something they should be well used to by now. But at home, 4-1. Since then, results have kind of petered out. They lost James Maddison for a long period, never quite regained their form. But from that point, that high point of talking about how they might win the league, with Arsenal still not quite playing the kind of football we'd hoped to be playing with the signings we made in the summer, they were still proudly telling us all that they would finish above us. As that seemed increasingly less likely, they talked about the fact, well, they're still Champions League, and that's a great first season for Ange Postecoglu. Then it became more about how they were going to stop us from winning the Premier League. And on Sunday, when that fell apart, Finishing 5th may be a big ask. They still have to play Manchester City and they go away to Liverpool in their next match. In their next 4 games, arguably, you can only really see them taking 6 points. So is this the beginning of the end of the Ange Postecoglu era? Or am I being knee-jerk? Well, I've always said that a manager typically loses his job when at least one of 3 conditions is met. And the first of those is if you lose the fans. If you really lose the fans, if they stop believing in the project or the process and they start questioning you, then it is really hard for a manager to maintain a positive squad. And that's definitely happening. And look, Ange is not making his life any easier. After the game against Newcastle, where the High Line had once again shredded them, Isak scoring 2 great goals on the break, a bizarre defensive blunder that led to the 2nd goal, and then a goal from a corner consigned them to a 4-0 defeat, only marginally better than the performance they'd put in last season, which was so catastrophic for them at St James's Park. And having beaten Villa 4-0, it really looked like they had the top 4 in their own hands. Then came the North London derby. And one of the things that people had started talking about, Stuart Pearce, as I mentioned in the previous video, had said that an 8-year-old can work out Tottenham. You simply catch them on the break and put a man on them for corners because they don't seem to be able to defend set pieces. And in the last 3 games, they've now conceded 9 goals. And almost all of them have come from set pieces and breakaways, exactly as Stuart Pearce predicted. And Ange Postecoglu, although after the match tonight said he'd kind of been misquoted, talked about, look, I don't really care about set pieces. If I thought that set pieces were going to make a big difference, I'd focus on them. But then tonight, again, 2 more set piece goals. And Ange hasn't made life easier for himself. When it's quite obvious that they're weak from free kicks, him talking about how he doesn't care too much about them is a little bit like turning up to the Tour de France in jeans and a t-shirt and saying Lycra doesn't make that much of a difference. At the very top of the Premier League, it is a game of small margins that make big differences. In order to progress, you have to have the attention to detail on everything. It's no secret that Arsenal are where we are right now because we've really worked on our set pieces. It's hard for me to see what they're working on and training at Spurs. But more tellingly, I think, tonight than the fact they gave away another 2 goals from set pieces, more tellingly than the fact that they just don't seem to be able to score at all. In the last 3 games, the only 2 goals they've scored has been a gift from David Raya and that really out of character penalty that was given away by, or nearly not given away, but ultimately given away by Declan Rice. When he does kick the ball in the area, it's just the wrong ball. They're toothless up front. They don't know how to defend set pieces, and they're too easy to be caught on the counter-attack. And you do have to agree with the body of Tottenham fans who's starting to say, what is it that Ange Postecoglu is getting into these players? After the game tonight, Ange said, I take full responsibility. But it was yet another belligerent press conference where he talked about, look, I'll take responsibility. But when challenged on it, said, look, I've told you I'm taking responsibility, I'll fix it. But does he have the wherewithal to fix this? More tellingly for me was that he was so angry with the players, constantly shouting to them, not for the first time this season, stop passing it backwards. So if the players aren't really listening to him, that's a problem. And you can understand why the fans might start to think, is he too tactically naive? Why they might be starting to fall out of love with his irascible post-match interpretations of the game. The second condition that most often leads to a manager losing their job is when they lose the players. And that's an issue for me because for tonight's match, changes again. Does he really know who his first 11 should be? Bentancur or Sarr? Kulusevski instead of Maddison? Should Son be playing on the left, the right, or through the middle? Is Richarlison good enough? Does anyone think Richarlison is good enough? The signing of Timo Werner, for all of the decent signings that they've made, this one was a bit baffling. And Brennan Johnson, I think, is a work in progress and a bright prospect. But when you look at Cole Palmer on the other bench and the similar amounts of money that were paid for the 2 players, you definitely get a feeling that Spurs aren't really doing it in the transfer market either. So are the players showing signs of discontent with him. I mean, if he's in the press conference after the game saying that the players don't seem to be taking on board what he's saying, has he lost the dressing room? Or is he very close to losing the dressing room? Because as much as we like to joke about those Spurs players, they know how important it is to get points off their nearest rivals. Losing to Arsenal and Chelsea back-to-back is bad. Conceding 6 points this season to Pochettino's Chelsea, who really haven't been at the races for most of the season, but are starting to show signs. Is that just going to add to the feeling amongst Spurs fans and possibly even players that Pochettino should have been in there? And finally, of course, it's Daniel Levy and ENIC. And if he loses the board, most of the time as a football manager, even if the fans love you and the players still love you, once you've lost the board, that is it. And I wonder if Daniel Levy's the kind of chairman you want to give you more time when it's clearly not working. Is Daniel Levy going to back him this summer with players that he clearly needs? Or are we heading into that sort of Pochettino, the end of the Pochettino era, where he wasn't given the funds because there wasn't the confidence in him, and how quickly it unravelled from a Champions League final to, well, then basically ending up with Nuno Espirito Santo? My feeling is that Ange Postecoglu really wants to build a team, really wants to transform Tottenham, but he has no actual experience of ever doing that. He has never in his career taken a team in the sort of situation that Tottenham are. And it is a poison chalice of a job, let's be honest with you. If Mourinho, one of the world's greatest managers, couldn't do it, Antonio Conte, one of the brightest managerial talents, couldn't do it, where do you look? Because it definitely wasn't Ryan Mason. So my feeling, my interpretation is that Ange Postecoglu has to some degree lost a large part of the Tottenham fan base. Seems to have lost the confidence of the players who, when he first came in, looked thrilled to be given more attacking license. But now, I'm sure in that dressing room, they're wondering why they don't practice corners, practice set pieces. When Eric Dyer left for Bayern Munich, he talked about how they never really talked tactics in games. So if he's not tactically astute enough, he's lost the players and a growing section of the fans. All ENIC really care about is the business side of things, and the customers have to be appeased. So whilst I don't think he's going to lose his job before summer, I think we could be looking at October, November, possibly December sacking for Ange Postecoglu. And then where do Tottenham look? Because as much as they see themselves as a top six club, realistically, if you're a manager, is that a place you want to go? A chairman who hardly ever gives you the players you want? A fan base who, the minute you do anything at all, start praising you as the Messiah, and then the moment it goes wrong, call for you to go? And a group of players who, let's be honest, on their day look capable, but their days don't come often enough. I know this is a Gooner channel, and you weren't probably expecting me to sing the praises of the Spurs fan base, the Spurs board, the Spurs players, or Ange Postecoglu. But I do quite like Ange Postecoglu. I'm not going to pretend that I'm worried that there will be some terminal decline at Tottenham and they might get relegated a couple of years from now. I feel like about Tottenham like I do about bees. I don't really like them around me, but I appreciate they're an important part of the ecosystem that we have to kind of protect, because never take for granted what a blessing it is as an Arsenal fan to have your main rivals, at least in terms of geography, your main rivals be this terrible and this deluded and still think of themselves as better than you. Just in the comments today, I had a Tottenham fan telling me that we will forever be in their shadow in Europe. What? I would miss that if they ended up in the Championship. But I genuinely think there is a chance that they could start to freefall. They have a great stadium, and every season they'll get to see great football there when the big teams turn up. But if they don't arrest this slide, who's to say that next season starts all that well? Mid-table mediocrity, another manager coming in who's not quite at it, and, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. But in any case, tonight, losing to Chelsea, losing the third game in a row, But in any case, losing to Chelsea tonight, two of their bitterest rivals in quick succession, after a drubbing by Newcastle, and with an away game to Liverpool to look forward to, where revenge is certainly on the cards, even though Liverpool aren't at their best at the moment. You have to fancy Jurgen Klopp will have more than enough in his armoury to beat them. And is it possible that Tottenham could get no more points out of the remaining fixtures? I'm jumping ahead again. They are playing Sheffield United, so, there are points in there for them. But I genuinely think that tonight will probably go down as the beginning, or maybe the middle of the end of the Ange Postecoglu era. Anyway, let me know in the comments how you feel. Am I jumping the gun? After all, I did say that I thought that Ten Hag would be sacked after 4 games of the season, and he's still around somehow. And I also said I don't think Pochettino's a very good manager, but I am starting to give him some grudging respect. Cup final and the semi-finals, not bad in his first season, trying to bring this team of players together. Chelsea, after all, very much representing the kind of team you'd expect your 10-year-old nephew to put together using Panini cards. So, like I said, let me know in the comments how you feel about it. If you're a Spurs fan, you want to disagree with me, let's have a conversation about it. But until I see you again, be lucky. Lots of love.